Welcome to this complete guide for 2025 on the TfL Topographical Assessment. This video is for anybody who's beginning their journey towards preparing for the topographical assessment, and if you have no previous knowledge and are starting from zero, this is the perfect place to start. In this video, we're going to first take a look at an overview of the test, what format it is, how the test works, and then we're going to look closer at some of the question types. And finally, towards the end of the video, I'll be sharing a strategy with you guys on how to improve your chances of passing the test. So the TfL Topographical Assessment is a 90-minute test which takes place only at the TfL Assessment Center. It's computer-based, meaning that you won't need a pen or a paper to answer any of the questions. You will answer the questions using only a mouse and on the computer. You won't need to type anything, so don't worry about spelling or writing. There'll be 25 questions in the assessment, and you will need a minimum of 60% to pass. Here is a quick overview of the assessment. The first 4 questions are route planning questions, and then you have 21 multiple choice questions. So to illustrate this, this is what it looks like. Some of you may already be familiar with these maps. The first part of the assessment are the route planning questions. You're going to have 4 of these questions, and these involve using a special software to plot a route. The second part of the assessment are multiple choice questions, of which there are 2 types. The first are the A to Z book questions, and the second are the compass-based questions. We're going to take a closer look at part 2 first. Part 1 we're going to leave until the end because these questions are more complex. So let's first take a look at part 2. The A to Z book question tests your ability to use the A to Z Greater Atlas in order to find locations of streets, towns, places, points of interest. Let's take a quick look inside what the A to Z Greater Atlas looks like. So this book will be provided to you in the assessment. You won't need to take one with you. However, to practice these questions, I do advise that you get a copy of this. I will leave a link below where you can get the most up-to-date edition from W.H. Smith. So let's take a quick look inside this book to see what some of the pages look like. The first pages that you're going to see are the key to map pages. These help you to find the pages for different areas within the Greater London area. At the back of the book, at the very end, you have the indexes. These are used to find specific points of interest, streets, places, or towns. And this is what the map pages look like. You've got page numbers here on the top left and top right, and then you have grid references using numbers on the right and left hand side, and then letters at the top and bottom. So we're not going to go into detail about the book here in this video. Let's take a look now at some example questions. You may be asked to find the page number or grid reference for an address. In this case, we're asked to find the grid reference and page number for 2 Temple Place. To answer such a question, we need to look at the index. Here is the first page in the index. Now, if we zoom in, we can see 2 Temple Place in this example is the very first street. And the grid reference and page number for it is 4K223 with more references and page numbers in circular brackets. So now if we go to our options, we can see that the first one matches what we found in the index. So therefore, that is the correct answer. So that's an example of the sort of questions you can expect in this section. You're going to find 17 questions in this format. As we've shown, they're going to be multiple choice. So you will select one answer from several answers given. Each question is worth 1 mark, making up a total of 17% for these questions combined. The second type of multiple choice questions are compass-based questions. These test your understanding of a compass in order to be able to identify directions, identify how to go from point A to point B, and how to navigate junctions. Let's take a look at an example question. Using the diagram, answer the following question. Which directions would you travel from A to B? So point A is here and point B is here. For some of us, this may be quite straightforward, but if it's not, don't worry. The key to this is memorizing the compass and the different points on our compass. So as we can see here, if we go from A to B, the direction of the arrow would be as such. This matches up with the following point on the compass, east. So going from A to B, you would be traveling east. And therefore, the correct answer is the third one. Now that one was a simple one. Let's take a look at another example of a compass-based question, one that is slightly more challenging. In this question, you're being asked, based on the diagram, to select the junction numbers that you would pass through on the most direct route between junction 15 and junction 1. and you're told to go the correct way along one-way streets and avoid blocked roads. So, for example, here you can see this is a blocked road, and these arrows indicate one-way streets to which we shouldn't travel in the opposite direction. So, for example, going from number 9 to number 6 would not be allowed. Going from number 8 to number 8 would also not be allowed. Going from number 10 to number 7 would not be allowed. So if we start at number 15, what is the most direct route to get to junction 1? So 15 is down here, junction 1 is there. So we have a number of options. If we go to 14 and then go all the way up and then take a left, that is a valid route and it is direct. Okay, because we're not going through any of the blocked roads, we're also not going in the opposite direction of any one-ways. And it is direct, it's not an indirect route. So if we take a look at these options, we can see that one of them does match up. So starting from 15 to junction 1, we would pass through 14, 11, 8, 5, 2, and then on to 1. So we can see here, this is the correct answer, 14, 11, 8, 5, 2, 1. Be careful because sometimes these questions try to trick you out. As you can see, option number 3 is very similar to option number 1. However, there is a slight difference in that the 2 is missing. So those are some examples of what compass-based questions would look like. In the test, you can expect 4 questions like this, and each of them will be worth 2 marks, making up a total of 8% of the total assessment marks. And of course, as we've just shown, there are going to be multiple choice where you select one or more answers from a number of options. If you want to practice some of these questions from section 2, 2A and 2B, we have some free questions available on our website, www.serupractice.com, and I will leave a link to them below this video. You won't need to sign up for an account to use them, just head on over to the link and you can begin practicing. And now we're going to come back and look at the first part of the topographical assessment, which is the route planning questions. Now this is the most important part of the test. It carries the most number of marks. However, it is the more challenging part of the test, and therefore you should spend more of your time studying this section than any other section. In this section, you're going to be given 4 questions. The questions are going to be different from the questions we've seen in part 2 because the questions in part 2 were multiple choice. However, here we're going to use a specialized map drawing software to answer the questions, which we're going to take a look at in a minute. So here is what a typical question looks like in part 1. On the right hand side, you will have the map drawing software where you will draw your route. On the left hand side, you will have the instructions and information. The instructions will always start by saying plot a direct route, and then it will say the starting location, which is this green marker here, and the end location, which is the red marker over here. So in this case, the starting location is Martello Street in E8, and the end location is Gascoigne Road in E9. You will also be given, sometimes, supplementary information about any roads that may be closed. This information may not always be there. In some questions, you will not be told that there are any closed roads, and therefore you don't have to worry about closed roads. However, in other questions, you may be told that 1, 2, 3, or more roads are closed, and therefore when you're drawing your route, you must avoid those closed roads. Now I'm going to show you what it would look like when you answer one of the route planning questions. So the software will show you the starting location and the end location that you need to get to. Remember, the question told us that Castland Road is closed. So you can see that Castland Road is this road here. It begins here where it says Castland and ends here. So we have to avoid this road. We can't cut through it and we can't travel across it. So let's begin. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line from the green marker to the red marker as follows. Now, the general rule for answering these questions is that you want to draw the most direct route. The most direct route should try to follow this line as close as possible. So the line that you draw from the start to the end, you should try to stay as close as possible to that when you're drawing your route. Before drawing your route, you should spend some time planning the route. Now this is a relatively short route, so it may not need much planning. However, sometimes you can get longer routes, and for those routes, planning definitely helps. In this case, I'm going to do a bit of planning before I begin drawing my route, and I want to try to stay as close as possible to this line. So if I start here, I can come down, come onto this main road here, and we may be tempted to continue along this direction because it stays close to the line. But if you look at this road here, you can see that there's a black line which cuts across. This indicates a dead end. Okay, so this is the first time you're looking at one of these maps. It is going to be quite complicated or overwhelming to look at because there are so many different features. Some of them are simple. For example, these arrows will be quite self-explanatory. To most people, you would know that this is a one-way road. Okay, but some of the other features, for example, this line here, or these thick black lines here, some other dashed lines that you may see here and there, markings such as this, you may not be sure what these are. Okay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but for now I'm just going to walk through an example solution to this question so you get an idea of how you would answer such questions in the assessment. So to continue with my planning, I've come onto the main road here and I'm not going to go through this road because it's a dead end. So instead we're going to come down, follow the main road, and we're going to take a left turn here. Now, at this point, you might say, well, look, we've deviated. We've gone quite far away from this line, which is the most direct route. That's fine. You will not always be able to stay right on that line. The idea is that you want to try to stay as close as possible to the line. So here we're going to continue, and then we can keep going. We have to make sure that we don't enter into Castellan Road. So at this point, I can't continue straight on because this road is closed. We've been told, remember? Let's turn onto this road here, which is Holcroft, and then take another turn. At this point, we want to make sure that we're still following this one way here, come around, go up and around, and then continue along, and finally we can join onto this one way and get to our destination. So that's the planning done. Let's now go ahead and begin drawing our route. The other thing that you'll notice is I'm trying to stay as close as possible to the left-hand side of the road when I'm drawing my route. And there we go. So that's the end of my route, and it stays very close to that line that we've drawn, and I've also avoided Castellan Road. So I hope this has given you an idea of what a route planning question would look like. There are generally 4 types of route planning questions. The first are closed roads. We just had a look at an example of a closed road route planning question. Not all questions will involve closed roads. Typically in an assessment you will get one closed road question. The other type that you may come across are routes involving tunnels. This may be the Rotherhite Tunnel, Blackwall Tunnel, or the Limehouse Link. Next you have long routes. These are similar to a normal question, however the route is longer. And then finally you have city routes, which tend to be shorter but involve more restricted access and pedestrian zones. So now that we've gone through what to expect in the test and the different question types, the question is, how can you pass the assessment? How can you maximize your chances of passing your assessment, ideally, on the first attempt? Well, if we go back to the test structure, first of all, we can see that most of the marks are for the first section. So it makes a lot of sense to spend most of your time when preparing on the first part of the test. Of course, you want to spend some time on part 2 as well, but your priority, most of your time, should be on learning and practicing for part 1. So what exactly should you do when it comes to preparing for part 1, the route planning section? Most people's approach, if you look around on YouTube, if you go to training centers, if you speak to people, their approach to preparing for the assessment is memorizing the most common routes, okay? In the assessment, you'll be given 4 routes, and most of the times these routes repeat themselves. So over the years, we've seen the same routes come up again and again. Memorizing the routes, of course, is going to help you to be able to answer these questions. However, from our experience, simply memorizing routes is not good enough to pass. And I'll explain why. First of all, there's always a chance that a route that you haven't memorized or practiced or recognized can come up. In fact, in the test, they can give you any route. It doesn't have to be a route that has come up previously. So if you only rely on memorizing routes, then there is a chance you may go to the assessment and none of the routes that you've memorized come up and therefore are likely to fail. Second of all, from the routes that you memorize to the routes that you need to answer in the assessment, there may be some differences in the map. This is due to differences in software based on where you train. It can also just be due to updates, even if you're training on the latest software. Therefore, if you memorize a route and try to recreate it in the assessment, that may not be the correct route necessarily. So, memorizing routes is a limited and flawed approach to preparing yourself for the assessment. There are better things that you can do. Memorizing routes definitely helps, but there is a more thorough and structured approach. At this stage, you may be thinking, well, it doesn't seem that complicated. Perhaps you're making it seem more complicated than it really is. Let's take a look at some data based on tens of thousands of students that TfL have shared with the public. So this is a Freedom of Information request that TfL responded to in 2018. And since then, there's also been more data that has been in line with the numbers here. But the main thing I just want to share with you is that they have shared the pass rate, the first pass rate for the topographical assessment, and it's only 45%. That means of 100 students who go and sit the test, only 45 of those pass on the first go. The second attempt is 48. So I hope that can explain to you guys that this test isn't as simple as it looks, and most people make that mistake. They make the mistake of underestimating the complexity of the test, not preparing for it, just watching YouTube videos, trying to memorize routes, and going into the test and recreating it. We have seen over the years a lot of students come to us who have failed on the first attempt, and by speaking to them, we can see where they've gone wrong. And over 95% of the students who practice with us, more than 97, 98% of students who practice with us, they end up passing, even if they have failed on their first attempt or their second attempt for that matter. So I'm going to share with you how you can do the same. First of all, when you're preparing for the route planning section, you want to make sure that you understand and learn the rules when it comes to topographical routes. Okay, so in the map software that I just showed you, you may have noticed a number of different features, different lines, different shapes, different colors, okay, which for most people may not make sense. However, each of these different features has a corresponding rule in terms of how you can draw along that feature, how to navigate that feature. So some of these are very basic and straightforward. For example, two-way roads, one-way roads, roundabouts. These are somewhat simple. However, even roundabouts, for example, they come in very different shapes and sizes, and they are sometimes hard to identify. And you can lose marks simply by drawing over a line or a feature that looks like it is not a roundabout, but in fact it is. Not all roundabouts are circular. Not all roundabouts are white. Not all roundabouts are clear to see. Those are just the basics. And then we have some other features, things like railway lines, footbridges, and footpaths. It is important to be able to identify these and navigate them accordingly. These are features that you can simply just pass through. However, how can we tell that there's a railway line and not a dead end, when a railway line appears to be a black straight line, and so can dead ends? They can appear the same. Next, you've got features that you don't want to access, things like restricted access, pedestrian zones, and dead ends. And then we have more advanced rules. This is really where most students struggle. So if you memorize routes, these are some of the things that seem pretty straightforward, and you can pick them up watching videos as well. However, when it comes to the more advanced rules, things like central reservations, roads on top of one another, flyover roundabouts, and unmarked one-ways, this is where most students get caught out, okay? And unless you practice these and understand the specificities of these rules, you will struggle to, on your own, pass the assessment. And then finally, you have special routes. So we've already looked at closed roads, okay? In this video, we took a brief look at closed roads. However, we didn't go into the detail about all of the rules concerning closed roads, and it's important to know those as well. You then also have tunnel routes, which come up very often and are arguably the most challenging route planning questions that come up. And they require a lot of time to understand how to navigate them as well, and the different rules. This is also where a lot of students struggle. So, in summary, if you want to maximize your chances of passing, begin by learning the route planning rules thoroughly, understanding them, and then take those rules and apply them by practicing the most common routes that come up again and again. Okay? Using this method, if you do it correctly, when you go to the assessment, no matter which route comes up, if it's a route that you don't recognize, because you know the rules and can apply them, you will be able to solve any route planning question. My final tip is to do training with an experienced instructor, and if you are looking for training, we can help you. So Here are our details. That's our website, our WhatsApp, and our phone number that you can get into contact with us. And we have instructors who speak a number of different languages. Here are some of them that are very common amongst our clients. So if you are looking for training for not just your topographical, but perhaps also your SERU assessment, get in touch with us today. You can head on over to our Facebook page as well and look at some of the reviews. We have more than 260 followers and we have a 100% recommendation rate from our students. So you can go through here and look at some of the stories and some of the experiences that our students have had working with us. That's all for this video, but before you go, make sure to subscribe because we're also going to upload a free mock test going through all of the questions that you can expect in an example assessment. That's going to be very useful for those of you who are preparing. And in the meantime, if you do have any questions, reach out to us on WhatsApp. Our number there is at the bottom, and we will reply to you as soon as possible. Good luck and take care.